Hi, I'm Nick Binedell. Welcome to the session with Paul Schoemaker, who's recently written a very interesting article in the Harvard Business Review about strategic leadership. Paul, welcome to GIBS. What is this idea of strategic leadership? Why is it important?
Thank you, Nick, and great to be here at GIBS. Well, I think the world is getting more complicated, and a lot of people go through their careers, and at some point they reach a point where the CEO or the board says, you're very good at execution, very good at operations, but gosh, you got to become a little bit more strategic, become a strategic leader. And then people say, well, what the hell is that? They have no clue. So we wrote an article to make it more accessible, because really people don't have a good sense of that. They normally think about, a vision, execution, strategy, but want to unpack it in terms of the basic skills that are needed to be a good strategic leader.
So the important idea is to link strategy and leadership together.
Yes.
Why is it that people wouldn't know this as a common sense thing?
Well, I think they do at one level, but I think they still, when they are in positions of leadership, get surprised, they get blindsided by things. So their mental map as to what it takes to really change organizations doesn't seem to be so complete. And which is more important, strategy or leadership, the chicken and the egg? You need both.
And your framework kind of gets at a few key issues. What's the most important idea of this?
Yeah, I think there's some cognitive skills, how you think. I mean, there's a thinking element to this. So the ability to anticipate, that's one. Whether that's scenarios or looking around the corner or being curious, intellectual curiosity, fostering those skills, I think are useful. The other is to interpret things always through multiple lenses, not just jump to one conclusion, triangulate the different points. Those are more cognitive skills, challenging people, not going with received wisdom. But then there are social, emotional skills as well, having to do with getting people on board, basically creating support for what you're trying to accomplish, alignment, you might call it. And then I think this notion of learning, because most of the times, things don't work out as you had hoped, right? Any plan is a basis for change, I think. So those are sort of key components that underlie the strategic leadership challenge, we think.
And you've created quite a useful pragmatic framework, I think, of assessing yourself and letting others assess you.
Yes.
Into these key areas to make things happen.
Indeed.
Mostly we learn to make things happen by experience.
Yes.
And I think very often by failure actually teaches us often more than success. So yes. How do you see executives, from your experience, which is extensive, how do executives learn?
Well, the experiential learning is probably more important than the book learning, etc. And I think we do learn more from the negative side, from failure. It's well established in psychology that pain has greater impact, looms larger than pleasure. But how good we really are at learning from experience is up to debate, because we also don't like to confront our limitations, push it under the rug. And I originally wrote a book called Brilliant Mistakes, how to benefit from the far side of failure. And as I look at innovations, they often come from mistakes. In the pharmaceutical industry, half of the drugs have a serendipitous origin. And so how do you create organizations that can get lucky, right? How do you design for serendipity? And I think that starts with very curious, intellectually curious leaders.
Do you think we're living in a particularly intellectually interesting time?
Well, geopolitically we are, because nobody really knows where this whole global scene is going to be, whether we're talking about the geopolitical troubles in the Middle East, or with China, or we're talking about the cultural issues, the competing civilizations. So yes, I think the ability to be very flexible and to be curious and to renew yourself is probably at considerable premium.
So that pushes both the strategic envelope, which is to make sure that you understand the competitive dynamics,
yes,
as well as the personal envelope to make sure you're able to execute better.
Yes.
How do executives build muscle in terms of building strategic leadership? Because I'm seeing it as strategy times leadership. There's a little X there. It's a multiplier, right?
Yes.
You want a leader to have a strategy, and you want someone with a strategy to be able to lead.
Yes.
How do they build muscle?
Well, through practice, as we do in sports, but also by coaching. So this is why I think we wrote the article, is a lot of people do want to get better, but they don't have the frameworks and they don't get the feedback. And we think that the general precepts or advice about strategic leadership is too general. It's not sufficiently customized. So what this tool, these assessment tools that we reference in this article and which are available, really focuses on is that your leadership challenges are different from mine. And we need to recognize this in how so it's the shotgun versus the rifle shot approach. And so far companies in their 360 assessments or even in their training and executive development don't customize it sufficiently, we think.
So it's sort of the last 10 yards of government delivery. It's from the gate to the house.
Yeah.
It's how to specify it for you and your company and your time.
Yes.
Which requires a lot of maturity and self-reflection, no doubt.
Indeed, and you need champions. You need leaders at the very top, whether it's the board or the CEO, who recognize that actually human capital and that is developed and specialized for this business is really the most valuable asset.
If you had to pick out a country that leads in strategic leadership in the way you're defining it, where would you go now and how's it changing?
Good question. So Europe is struggling, obviously, with economic issues. The United States is bouncing out of it a little bit. But I think that dynamic markets, emerging markets, but dynamic markets, South Africa could be an example, South America. If you really want to see where people are managing the unknown well, I would go to more dynamic, more tumultuous, where profound change, paradigmatic changes are happening. So we hope to write, some articles about how leaders do it in this country.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, GIBS is trying to promote that agenda. We're sending our MBAs to Brazil this year, and we're also sending our Global Executive Development Program for the first time to Brazil this year. Partly anticipation of soccer and the Olympics, but partly to see the good business practices that a big emerging country is adopting and that we can learn from. Paul Schoemaker, thanks very much for spending the time with us.
Thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure to be here.